My name is Damon Tate from Washington, D.C., and this is the OhioRAAM Show.
Well, thank you, Damon, for that introduction. Damon was on the OhioRAAM Show back in September of 2016. You can see him in the archives on the OhioRAAMshow.com, show number 128. And this is the OhioRAAM Show. It is a show about cycling and ultracycling. Comes to you 3 times a month on the 7th, the 17th, and the 27th of each month, although that schedule is going to be changing somewhat next fall. And my name is Lee Kreider. I host the show, and this is show number 151. And the OhioRAAM Show is brought to you by the time stations in the race across America, time stations 41 in Oxford, Ohio, and time stations 42 in Blanchester, Ohio. And the dates there are for this year's race starting at Oceanside, California, and it will start with the solo riders on the 13th of June and the team riders on the 17th. Our time stations will open on the 19th of June, a little earlier than we had projected before, and they will stay open until the 24th of June, and the last racer has passed by. The new projections are out, and you can find the time station arrival projections on the OhioRAAM Show website. Look down there at the links, and you'll see time station arrival projections. On today's show, we're going to go out to Portland, Oregon, and visit with Chris Ramsey, who will be riding in the Race Across the West. We'll learn about Chris and his relationship with multiple sclerosis in the show. We always invite you to look at the show notes underneath the video on the OhioRAAMshow.com to learn more about each one of our guests. So with that, let's head on to Portland, Oregon, and Chris Ramsey. And so Chris, I guess you're in the Denver area right now, is that right?
Yeah, I'm out here in Denver visiting my family out here for the week.
Portland, Oregon is your home, is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Glad to have you here on the OhioRAAM Show. And while we're introducing people, let's go over to Rob Jackson. You are in Portland, aren't you, Rob?
I am in Portland right now, Lee, thanks.
And Rob's going to be your crew chief, is that right, Chris?
You got it. He's going to be the man keeping me on task.
Okay, well, Chris, when we first started talking, you were going to be a 2-person Race Across America team. And as I understand it, your one partner was not able to go with you. So you are now a 1-person Race Across the West team. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. It's my friend Aaron Jeniges and I had talked about doing RAM for probably probably about 5 years. And decided this last July that it was time to do it, and the families were both on board, and so we started all the wheels turning. Unfortunately, he this past fall hurt his back, ended up needing surgery. Being a physical therapist myself, I can attest that trying to gear up to do a 2-man relay for RAM is probably not the best incentive to be coming back from back surgery. Someday, hopefully, he and I will do that together, but he couldn't do it this year, and finding the person that you want to ride with who's able to ride it and has the time to ride it and is interested in riding RAM and then finding somebody that is going to inspire me to want to ride with them is not an easy task. So there are very few people other than Aaron that I would imagine myself doing RAM with. But the wheels had already been turning from a fundraising standpoint. So I decided that I needed to find another avenue. And since I wasn't solo qualified, Ross seemed to fit the same time frame and here in Colorado, which would be nice for my family maybe to be able to come out and see it.
Well, you say you're a physical therapist, and I have a feeling we might get into that a little bit later on when we get talking about some things. But tell me a little about your cycling.
Well, I started as an athlete when I was a little kid. My dad entered me actually right down the street from here. I did my first 1-mile running race when I was 2. Since then, I'd been running all along with him for a long time, and then got into bike racing in high school when I got injured. Had some trouble training in the summertime, so I did a bike race. And at that point, didn't realize that if you couldn't keep up, they booted you out of the bike race. But then a few years later, I got back into cycling and then into triathlons eventually in college, and raced fairly competitively in the triathlon world, certainly as the amateurs go, for the better part of 22 years. And then was kind of just done with that one day and have turned to cycling. And so the endurance part's always been there. But the cycling bit is a bit more recent in terms of an actual focus.
I wish I'd kept notes on people on this show who came into cycling by way of triathletes. A number of friends here in Ohio started out as triathletes, and now they're strictly cycling. It's kind of an interesting process, isn't it?
Yeah, it's, from my standpoint, biking was always the most fun of the three sports. Even though running was probably the one I was the best at, the bike, you go places. You get on your bike and you go, and you can ride not just 3 or 4 or 5, even 10 miles away if you're doing a long run, but you can go 50 miles away from your house, and you see a lot more stuff when you go out for a bike ride.
I had to give up running for cycling, and I found out you can get to a lot more places to eat on a bike.
That's true, yeah, or have coffee or drink beers, or whatever works for you.
I understand that you were crew chief on a RAM team. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's probably what really started the bug for RAM itself. I'd known about that RAM existed before then, but when I was asked by some friends in 2007 to be their crew chief for their 4-man RAM team, and it was going to be their first. Everybody, the entire crew, all the riders, it was all of us. We were all RAM rookies. And so as crew chief, as Rob will find out, you get kind of the worst of both worlds, because you hear all the stuff the riders have issue with, you hear the stuff the crew has issue with, and you got to be in the middle dealing with it. So I kind of swore off ever doing it again unless I was actually going to be a rider. But yeah, so here I am. But I from a crew chief standpoint, Rob, I really appreciate you coming out, because I know what you're going to go through.
Well, to have a bunch of people in kind of a pressure cooker of a vehicle 24 hours a day, it's a tough job, and it takes a lot of humor. Rob, we're going to go over to you. Are you prepared for this job?
But I don't know now. Now that I hear what Chris is telling me now, this is not what he sold me on earlier. But yeah, I'm willing to dive in.
Okay. Well, tell me all about yourself, Rob. Are you active in cycling, and how did you get hooked up with doing this job?
So yeah, I've been involved in cycling and triathlon since about 2006. A couple of people happened to be in my life all pretty much at the same time who were into Ironman distance, and all pretty much at different levels inspired me. So I kind of dove in on a plan to get into triathlon, completing an Ironman after 5 years. Found that probably the second year in that I really liked the off-road triathlon, the Xterra series, and I really love mountain biking. Pursued that, and that's been my focus pretty much the whole time, with cyclocross racing as sort of a training method for that I've actually fallen just as much in love with. And that's where I met Chris, was at my first cyclocross race back in 2012. But he had been my wife's PT before that, and I kind of knew of him just through the community here in Portland. It's vibrant, but still kind of small. So then Chris and I just ended up racing on the same cyclocross team for a number of years. Actually, only this year has that team sort of disbanded and we've moved on. But he approached me with this, and I mean, we'd become friends over the years, and I said, yeah, let's do this.
Have you ever crewed before, or had any experience with crewing?
Honestly, I'd never really heard of RAW or really RAM before Chris approached me.
And what is your crew going to look like?
I think we're down to a short list. We don't have final selections made, and that all could change. I feel good about the short list that we have right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good short list right now. It is. We're recording this obviously earlier than it's being aired, so we got a little bit more time than what it may seem like here in mid-March. I think we'll probably we're going to have probably either 4 or 5 people. I don't think we'll have any more than that, but hopefully everybody's friends at the end.
Rob, don't let us scare you about this task. Everybody has been rookies at some time or the other. And I would say if you could possibly get to one of the crew seminars, that would be a great help.
I've also been reading Martin Grubel's book and Gregory Scott's book, The Master's RAM. which has been I think a really good backup to the or confirmation of some of the ideas that Rob and I have had about how we're going to approach this. That seemed to be good. I think I told Rob last night, I feel like we're reinventing the wheel, but I think at this point anyway, but I think we kind of have to reinvent the wheel a little bit to, when we finally do make our decisions, feel confident that our decisions are indeed the right ones.
Well, I need to get that book, and I've seen it, but I just haven't got it yet. I think it's kind of interesting. Of course, Dex Took's book, or Dex and Joni wrote together, that's become sort of a textbook on crewing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's looking at it both from the rider as well as the crew, so it's kind of nice. They break it down pretty well.
Well, I'll have to get the book, but let's get on to what your team's about here, which is multiple sclerosis. And I believe, Chris, you yourself have a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, do you not?
Yeah, I had transverse myelitis in 2008, which is a sort of the singular version of multiple sclerosis. So I started down the road in 2008 going on the medications for MS because it looked like it was going to turn into that. And 2011, the actual diagnosis came down the pipeline. And so, yeah, so I've got it myself and am trying not to let it keep me down at all.
What are your symptoms like, and how are you managing them?
So multiple sclerosis is interesting. It's a nervous system disorder where the body attacks the insulation that goes around the nerves in the central nervous system, so in the brain and in the spinal cord. And the damage is somewhere between temporary and permanent, depending on where it is and how bad the attack is, and who knows how many different criteria are involved in determining whether it's permanent or temporary. I have no idea. But when I had transverse myelitis, which was a lesion at C2, so up here in the neck, I went from basically any day of the week being able to finish an Ironman, maybe not race it, but finish an Ironman in the allotted time, to being able to ride my bike inside for a half an hour before I had to stop and get off, or if I took a walk to get the mail, which at the time was about a half-mile round trip walk to get the mail, I needed a nap to afterwards to recover from it. And over the course of time, that gradually got better, but I still don't have full control over my right quad. I don't have full control over my abdominals as much as the left side anyway. And then they get the various things that a lot of people get, tingling in the hands and pain in the hands and heat sensitivity. And I had a vision disorder that is probably one of the reasons why I finally really didn't enjoy doing triathlons anymore, which will be interesting to see how this goes with RAAM. My eyes tend to bounce around a little bit, and so it's hard to kind of focus on spots when I'm hitting the pavement. Or so if I'm running, at the time when I was running, it would leave me nauseous when I would go running. I couldn't read signs. I'd have to stop and let it settle down before I could read a street sign. And I didn't ride outside for probably a month and a half, because I just didn't think I would stay upright on my bike. But since then, I've gotten back into cycling and it's done well. The time trial position of that, really looking down and forward when I'm looking up, seems to drive it the worst. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. But one of the things with MS is that the symptoms are different for everybody. There is no one case that is exactly like another. They're all different than each other.
The diagnosis of MS is not necessarily, as I told you before we went on the air, my wife has MS herself, although over 40 years, she has not really progressed much. She's not on medication, but you are getting medication, are you not?
Yeah, yep. I've been on medications since about 2 months after I got the first diagnosis back in 2008.
And I understand that you are now on an oral medication.
Yeah, I started on an injection that was a daily injection called Copaxone that I took from 2008 until 2014, and it did pretty well. I chose it for the side effects that it had, basically a local irritation when you did the injection, but pretty much that was it. Some of the other ones would leave you feeling like you had the flu for a weekend, which was really not in my interest. And others I couldn't take, because the most effective one I can't take because I've been exposed to a virus that if I took that particular one, it would leave me with about a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying every year from an infection. So I'm going to skip that one. But the current one that I'm on now is called Tecfidera. Yeah, it's an oral pill I take twice a day, so I don't have to poke myself anymore, which is kind of nice. And things so far seem to be going pretty well with it. So until things change, I will be on that one for the foreseeable future.
As we were talking before we went on the air, it's only been, within the last 20 years that there's been any kind of treatment at all. And new treatments are coming out all the time, but these are not really cures. They're just to manage the progression. Is that not right?
Yeah, that's correct. There is no cure for multiple sclerosis at this point. The medications that are out there now are all immunosuppressive in nature. So they try to diminish decrease the ability of your immune system so that you can, so you don't end up fighting yourself because it's an autoimmune disorder. Interestingly, as you said, I'm a physical therapist, or as you noted, and
right.
When I was in school for PT almost 20 years ago, the main treatment that we were taught for people with MS was don't exercise them too hard, don't get them too tired out, don't get them too hot. Those are the two big things that you didn't do with people with multiple sclerosis. Since then, there has been more and more research that shows that when you do get hot, you do actually get a re-exacerbation of your past symptoms. So you feel what you had before more, but when you cool back down again, that goes away. That's not permanent in that nature. The actual exacerbations of new symptoms, that's a bit more disconcerting. And then during that acute phase, I would not want to get hot to minimize the damage done.
Right.
But interestingly, in the last 10 years, even probably, there's almost a 180 in terms of the people that have MS tend to be less active than the normal population. They have a much higher incidence of depression than the normal population. And if you're going to get weak from MS, which is probably inevitable in everybody, but more so in people with MS, if you're going to have discoordination, your coordination is going to get worse. Your endurance is going to get worse. All just the same things that happen with age, but significantly accelerated by the multiple sclerosis.
Right.
In my mind, the best defense from 2008 on, the best defense against MS was to have a good offense. And so the higher I can keep that bar of fitness, the lower that bar has to drop before it's really going to affect me.
It's so interesting you bring that up, because it wasn't but a few months ago that my wife and I attended an MS meeting, and we had a physical therapist there, and he gave us pretty much the same story you were giving us.
Yeah, good. I'd like to hear that.
The importance of exercise. My wife swims regularly, and it's something she can do. She has a little balance trouble, so walking isn't a real option. And so the swimming pool, the water aerobics is ideal for her.
Well, case in point, though, if it's balance, if your wife's problem is with balance, just like strength, just like endurance, which everybody kind of takes for granted as a use it or lose it phenomenon, balance is a use it or lose it phenomenon. So if you don't if I look at my 7-year-old who is walking down the cracks and trying not to fall off the crack as he's walking across the parking lot, he's having fun and playing. But what I see as a PT is somebody practicing their balance.
Right.
So if the more you practice your balance, the better it will get. And I don't care who you are, it can get better than it is. It may not get perfect, but it can still get better than it is.
Yeah, my wife just completed a series of physical therapy sessions with her walking, and they were able to help her quite a lot. I can see a definite improvement.
Great.
Well, let's get on with your program and what you're trying to raise funds for.
So I have, in the past, I've done a couple of big pushes to raise funds in one way or another for MS. 2013 was my biggest one, where I raced the Ironman World Championships for the sixth and last time, and was just trying to raise funds at that point for the Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU. They have a really good MS department. Okay. And I was trying to raise funds. My primary care physician and my neurologist. My primary care physician is the head of human sports and conditioning over at the OHSU Human Performance Lab. And I'm fortunate enough to have the head of the MS department as my neurologist over there. And the two of them know each other really well and collaborate with each other on research projects and whatnot. And I knew they were trying to look into doing some research on athletes with MS. And there is zero. I've combed the research. There is zero research on athletes with MS. There's exercise with MS, but there's not anybody that does high intensity exercise, particularly like athletes do. So they were thinking about doing that. So I really tried to raise money for that study, for that pilot study. That was my goal. And that pilot study ended up, they couldn't find enough subjects with it, but it went to research there. And we raised probably about $16,000, I think, for that. And then I've done the bike, the MS Society, the Bike Oregon, or the Bike MS rather, in Oregon. And this time I'm continuing fundraising for the MS Society itself. Partly they help to fund research, partly they help to actually benefit people that have MS, but have maybe they've had an exacerbation and they can't go to work. And because they can't go to work, they can't afford to pay their heating bill that month. That the MS Society can actually step in and help them with paying their heating bill. And so they do above and beyond just the research as well to help not only find the fix, but also plug the holes for where, or the thumb in the dike, so to speak.
You have a donation website where people can donate to this fund, do you not?
I do. I believe you have that. I don't have it memorized, so I think you've got that.
So if you're watching the show on the show website, OhioRAAMshow.com, in the show notes, which appear right below this video, you'll see a link to that donation page. There'll also be links there to, I believe you have a website as well, do you not?
Yeah, we have a Facebook page there. I have a blog that I might be getting up and running. When we get closer to the show, Lee, or actually after we're done recording here, there is a shortened version of that website for the donation that I can get you as well.
Okay, well that's all, and probably the easiest way is if you're watching the show on some other facility, such as YouTube or one of the other websites that do embed the show, and we always appreciate people who do that. And by the way, let me say, if you have a website you'd like to have the show embedded on, just give me a holler via the OhioRAAMshow.com website. There's a place there you can contact me, and I'd be glad to do it. Sorry for getting that little commercial in. On the links below there, you'll see, make it easy for you to get to it. You'll help me get those shorter versions, right?
Yeah, and if you're on Facebook, if you just did a little search for RAW, R-A-W, RAW versus MS, RAW vs MS, you'd find that link too in the Facebook.
Yeah, well, I'll have that link in the show notes, and we hope that you can do some good there. This is a disease that affects a lot more people. There, of course, as you know, Chris, there are people who have the disease who have never been diagnosed.
Yep. Possibly
never will, but that keeps on. I don't know what the population of MS is, but it's more significant than most of us realize. Well, let's get back to Rob. We wish you well, Rob, with your crew. I hope we didn't put the fear of God in you over what might happen. It really isn't that bad. And besides that, you can always say it's only 1,000 miles, so we can survive anything for that.
Wait! I thought it was 860 miles. It's 1,000 miles.
Well, you know, I don't know what it's going to be this year. You know, they had a detour last year that got about 960 or something like that. Yeah,
920. It was about the big detour.
I rounded it up.
So, Chris, I think Lee's just trying to under promise and over deliver.
There you go.
That's what we're doing. You'll do fine. I have a feeling you'll do great. And since you're going to one of the seminars, that'll help as well. We wish you well, and we wish your crew well.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we won't get to see you in Ohio, but there's always another year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could start a fire for me, and maybe I want to do it after this. Who knows?
Either that or you won't ever want to see it again, but I think you will. You're starting to say a goal for you.
You know, despite the fact that being a crew chief was tough, it's a bit more convoluted when you're working with a relay team where you've got so many different balls in the air at the same time than when you're trying to work with just one. But regardless of how it turned out, they are memories of a lifetime. And I believe I'm going to be the first doing raw solo as well as anybody with MS.
Okay, well, Rob, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you, Chris. We wish you well. We wish you safety, first of all. And secondly, great success.
I appreciate it, Lee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris Ramsey, for being with us. We appreciate that. We want to make sure that everyone visits the website, OhioRAAMshow.com. There you'll see more information about Chris in the show notes. And always, we want to thank you for supporting the show, those of you who watch the show, those of you who give us likes and shares and retweets on the social media. That means a lot to the show and helps us to grow the sport of ultracycling. Our next show will be on May the 17th. It will be a 4-person team called the Four Dudes, and they will be a part of the 3,000 Miles to a Cure program. So with that in mind, we'll see you in about 10 days. Goodbye.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.